The sound wasn't a gunshot. It wasn't a scream. In the world of organized crime, the most powerful moments are often the quietest. On an icy Tuesday night in January 1958, inside the back room of a low-lit Italian restaurant on the outskirts of Chicago, the loudest sound imaginable was the soft, dry whisper of a check sliding across a polished mahogany table. It was blank. The man who pushed it forward was Sam Gia, the undisputed boss of the Chicago outfit, a figure rumored to control unions, police departments, and even influence far beyond city limits. Sam Giancana didn't bargain. He issued commands. When a blank check came from him, you didn't hesitate. You thanked him, wrote a number, and surrendered whatever part of yourself he wanted. Across from him sat Dean Martin, alone, no manager, no muscle, no entourage. Just a man in a tailored silk suit holding a glass of scotch that had long since gone warm. The room felt suffocating, heavy with old cigar smoke, garlic, and the unmistakable edge of danger. Two men lingered in the shadows behind Gio, hands tucked inside their jackets, waiting for a nod that would erase a legend. Dean glanced at the check, then at the man who could end his life with a subtle gesture. Most men would have shaken. Frank Sinatra would have signed without blinking, eager to stay in favor. A politician would have signed for profit. An ordinary man would have signed out of fear. Dean Martin did none of that. He took a slow pull from his cigarette, exhaled a calm ribbon of smoke toward the ceiling fan, then reached not for the pen, but for his drink. He took a measured sip, set the glass down softly, and spoke words no one in the history of the Chicago underworld had ever dared to say. "Some," Dean said quietly, his voice steady and unhurried. The ink's too heavy. What followed over the next 20 minutes became one of the great untold confrontations of the 20th century, a standoff between absolute authority and absolute indifference. A moment where a singer from Steubenville, Ohio, looked straight at the devil and walked away untouched. To understand why Dean's refusal bordered on suicide, you have to rewind to 1958 and strip away the polished nostalgia of the era. Forget diners and jukeboxes. The entertainment business back then was built on fear. The men in charge didn't rely on contracts or lawyers. They relied on enforcers. The Mafia, especially the Chicago outfit and New York families, controlled show business outright. They owned the clubs. They controlled the jukebox routes. They decided who got liquor licenses. If you wanted to perform in Chicago, Manhattan, or Las Vegas, their approval wasn't optional. If you wanted radio play, their blessing mattered more than talent. Las Vegas wasn't the corporate playground it is now. It was mob territory. The Sands, the Dunes, the Riviera, all of them were financed through Teamsters, pension money, loans handed out by men who expected loyalty in return. For entertainers, the mob weren't background figures. They were the gatekeepers. You either cooperated or vanished. Frank Sinatra embraced that world. He admired those men. He loved the private meetings, the coded handshakes, the sense of protection. He believed standing close to dangerous people made him powerful. Dean Martin didn't share that illusion. Dean saw the mob through tired eyes. He grew up around men like them in the hard corners of before fame. He dealt cards in illegal backrooms. He boxed for pocket change in smoky basements. He'd seen fingers broken over debts, lives ruined without a second thought. To him, these weren't kings. They were bullies in tailored suits, and he knew exactly what they were capable of. He had watched men like them destroy lives for amusement. To Dean, they weren't legends or kings. They were just another kind of boss. And Dean Martin had always despised bosses. He kept them at a careful distance. He was courteous, shook hands, shared drinks, cracked jokes, but he never asked for anything and never owed anyone a favor. That balance worked until the night Sam Giancana decided neutrality was no longer acceptable. The call came on a Thursday. Dean was in the middle of a successful tour, riding a wave few entertainers ever reached. His records were selling by the millions. The Jerry Lewis chapter was long behind him. He had rebuilt himself as a solo star, and Archie, that moment, was one of the most adored figures in America. He was in his hotel room when the phone rang. It wasn't his agent. It wasn't his wife, Jean. A flat, emotionless voice said, "Mr. Giocana wants to see you." No explanation was needed. "I'm working," Dean replied casually, holding the receiver with his shoulder while he poured himself a drink. "Tuesday," the voice continued, ignoring him. "Armory Lounge, Chicago, 8 o'clock. Call me alone." The line went dead. Dean stood there listening to the dial tone. He knew exactly what this meant. The Armory Lounge wasn't a restaurant. It was a throne room. You didn't go there for a conversation. You went there to be given orders or to be judged. Most men would have panicked. They would have called lawyers, managers, maybe even federal contacts, which would have been a fatal mistake. Frank Sinatra would have made half a dozen calls bragging about the meeting. Dean simply hung up, finished his drink, and told his tour manager to clear Tuesday night. "Where you headed, Dino?" the manager asked. "Chicago," Dean said, grabbing his golf clubs. "Got to tea time with a shock." The flight into Chicago was rough. Winter had swallowed the city in dirty snow and steel-gray skies. Dean sat quietly, staring out the window. He understood the stakes. Ghana was under pressure. The federal government was tightening its grip. The same politicians the mob claimed to have helped elect were now turning on them. Sam needed to prove he was still in charge, and there was no louder statement than forcing the biggest star in the country to submit. Dean took a cab from O'Hare and gave the driver the address on Forest Park. The driver glanced up in the mirror, his expression changing instantly. Everyone in Chicago knew what the Armory Lounge was. "You sure about this, buddy?" the driver asked. "Yeah," Dean said calmly, adjusting his cup. "Got to tea time with a shock." When the cab stopped, the street was eerily quiet. A black Lincoln Continental sat, idling at the curb, steam rolling from its exhaust. Like a living thing, Dean paid the fare and stepped out. The wind sliced through his coat. He paused, lit a cigarette, cupping the flame with his hand, and drew in the freezing air. He knew it might be the last clean breath he ever took. Then he opened the heavy wooden door and walked inside. The restaurant was closed. Chairs were stacked upside down on tables in the main dining area. The place felt abandoned. The only light came from the back, a soft yellow glow leaking from a private room. Dean crossed the empty floor, his footsteps echoing sharply against the tile. Click, click, click. He entered the back room. It was small, paneled in dark wood, thick with the smell of meat and cologne. At the center table sat Sam G. He was compact, balding, with eyes dark and sharp, like olives soaked too long in vinegar. He was eating sausage and peppers, and he didn't look up when Dean walked in. Two men stood behind him, motionless, built like furniture designed for violence. Finally, Giocana wiped his mouth with a napkin and spoke without lifting his eyes. "Dino," he said, "you're late." Plane was pushing into a nasty wind. "Sam," Dean said casually as he pulled out a chair. "You know how it goes. Weather doesn't care about schedules." He sat without waiting for permission, crossed his legs, and leaned back like he owned the room. "Mind if I pour one?" Giocana motioned toward a bottle of J&B sitting on the table. "Don't threaten me with kindness," Dean said, smiling as he poured a healthy shot. "Neat." Giocana watched closely, searching for a shake, a hesitation, anything human to exploit. Dean's hand never wavered. After his first sip, Dean set the glass down. "So," he said lightly, "what's the occasion?" "I doubt you flew me in just to enjoy sausage in silence. Giocana pushed his plate aside, amusement gone. "My daughter," he said. "Bernie, she's getting married next month. 4th of July weekend." "Independence Day?" Dean replied. "Nice touch." Giocana nodded. "It's going to be big. Judges, union heads, friends from New York, family. A statement." "I'll send her a nice toaster," Dean said flatly. Giocana ignored the joke. "I don't want a gift. I want you." Dean raised an eyebrow. "Me? You sing at the reception," Giocana continued. "Then you headline at the Villa Venice. 2 weeks. Private. Exclusive. The Villa Venice Wasante Justa Club." It was Giocana's personal playground, a place used to entertain powerful figures and quietly wash money clean. Performing there wasn't an offer. It was a command. Dean took another drag from his cigarette. He understood the weight immediately, son, Dean said, topping ash into the tray. "I'm booked that weekend. Sands Hotel. 2 weeks. Contracts signed. Ads already running. Unless you've figured out how to clone me, I can't be in both places." Giocana laughed, a dry, joyless sound. "Jack Entreter," he said with contempt. "You're hiding behind Jack and I put him in business. You think a Sands contract matters to me?" "It matters to me," Dean replied evenly. Giocana's hand slammed the table. Forks rattled. "I make one call and that contract disappears. I make another and the Sands shuts its doors. Don't talk to me about paper." Dean didn't flinch. "It's not about paper," he said quietly. "It's about my word." I shook Jack's hand. I said I'd be there. The room tightened. This was the line no one crossed. No one refused like this. Giocana leaned back, incredulous. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather checkbook. He uncapped a gold pen and signed his name on a blank check. No date, no payee, no amount. He slid it across the table until it rested beside Dean's glass. "Fill it in," he said. "Whatever the Sands is paying you, double it, triple it, add another zero. I don't care. You want 100 grand, 250,000, write it. Money means nothing to me. This is about loyalty." The trap was perfect. If Dean signed, he would walk out wealthier than ever before. But he would also walk out owned. And Dean Martin knew that once you cashed a check like that, you never stop paying for it. He would have become just another item in the Chicago Outfits inventory, filed alongside slot machines, unions, and nightclubs. Dean studied the check. He thought of his father, Gaetano, a barber who stood all day cutting hair for pocket change. He thought about the grind of Steubenville, the long, brutal climb out, and the freedom he had earned inch by inch. Money had never owned Dean Martin. It never would. He gave it away as fast as it came in. What mattered to him was independence. He drained the last of his scotch, set the glass down carefully, then placed a single finger on the check and slid it back across the table. "The ink's too heavy, Sam," he said. "Evenly." Giocana blinked. "What did you say?" "The ink," Dean repeated. "It's too heavy. I can't carry it." Giocana's voice rose. "You're turning down a blank check. Are you crazy? Or are you trying to get yourself killed?" "I'm not looking to die," Dean replied calmly. "But I'm not interested in being owned either." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You've got Frank. He'll sing at the wedding. He'll do whatever you want. He enjoys this world. Me, I'm just a singer. I go where I said I'd go. If I break my word to Jack for money, then I'm just another guy in a tux with no spine. And my mother didn't raise me that way? The insult was subtle, but it landed. Giocana shot to his feet, the chair crashing backward. You think this is a joke? He snarled. You think magazine covers make you untouchable? I can erase you. I can pull your records. I can make sure no club ever books you again. I can make sure you have a bad day on a golf course. The men behind him stepped closer. Hands slipped from jackets. Not weapons yet, but close enough. Dean stayed seated. He didn't shrink. He calmly lit another cigarette. You can shut down the records, Dean said. You can kill the movies. You can bar me from every stage in the country. He blew smoke straight across the table. But you can't stop me. Giocana exploded. What does that even mean? It means I don't need any of this, Dean said. I was happy dealing cards for $50 a week. I was happy pumping gas back home. Take this away and I'll go back to that. I'll play golf on a public course, drink cheap wine, and sleep just fine. He smiled then, and it chilled the room because it was honest. You can't scare a man who doesn't need what you're selling. Frank needs the noise. I don't. This is just a job to me. If it ends, I'll find another. Giocana stared at him, searching for hesitation, for panic, for the crack every man eventually showed. There was nothing, just calm refusal. Dean Martin was willing to walk away from fame, fortune, and everything that came with it simply to keep his word. The room fell silent. Somewhere in the kitchen, a refrigerator hummed. Giocana glanced at the men behind him, then at the scraps of paper on the table, then back at Dean. Killing Dean Martin would have been ugly. The authorities would descend. Questions would follow, and worse than that, it would mean Dean had rattled him. Giocana let out a short chuckle that grew into real laughter. He shook his head slowly. You're out of your mind, he said. You really mean it. You'd go back to pumping gas. Best gas man in Ohio. Cleaned a windshield for free. Dean gave him a quick wink. Giocana picked up the check, tore it into small pieces, and let them fall to the floor like confetti. Get out of here, Dino, he said, settling back into his chair and reaching for his fork. Go back to Vegas. Go sing for Jack. Appreciate it, Sam, Dean replied, standing. I'll still send a wedding gift. Just go, Giocana muttered. Before I remember, I'm supposed to be dangerous. Dean walked toward the door, feeling the weight of every eye in the room on his back. His body wanted to sprint. Every nerve screamed that this was the moment something went wrong, but he kept his pace steady. He checked his watch, straightened his collar, opened the door, and stepped out into the frozen Chicago night. When the door shut behind him, he leaned against the brick wall of the alley, his legs suddenly weak. His heart slammed against his chest. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped the sweat from his face, despite the cold. Jesus! He breathed into the empty street. He had just gambled his life and walked away. He flagged down a cab at the corner. Airport, he said, and step on it. I want out of this city. Years later, Dean did perform at the Villa Venice, but it was on his terms, when it suited him as a favor, not an obligation. That night in 1958 changed the rules. The mob understood something important. They could work with Dean Martin, but they could never own him. Frank Sinatra spent a lifetime chasing the approval of men like Giocana, and they used him accordingly. Dean treated them with polite distance, and they respected him for it. Giocana would later tell an associate that Dean was the only Hollywood star who felt real to him, a man with ice in his veins. This story leaves behind a simple truth about power. Power isn't money. It isn't influence. It isn't a blank check. Power is the freedom to walk away when you're willing to lose everything rather than surrender your integrity. you become untouchable. Dean Martin showed that the strongest word isn't agreement, it's refusal. He stared into danger without blinking and chose himself. In a world obsessed with grinding and compromising to get ahead, his story is a reminder that sometimes the bravest move is to say no. The blank check didn't scare him. The ink was too heavy, and his dignity was worth more than anything money could buy.